The Vraxian fleet commander Nix's Talos trembled as the holographic recording played for the 5th time. His 17 appendages quivered involuntarily, releasing pheromones of dread that permeated the command bridge. The other officers maintained respectful distances from their superior, trying not to absorb his fear through their sensitive olfactory membranes. "Impossible," he chittered, his mandibles clicking rapidly. "Our intelligence indicated these humans were barely interstellar. How could they have developed such barbarism?" The recording showed what should have been a routine subjugation. The Vraxian vanguard had descended upon the human mining colony on Proxima Centauri B, expecting the usual capitulation pattern displayed by civilizations first encountering superior technology. Instead, the feed showed chaos. Blood. Vraxian. Warriors, elite soldiers equipped with particle shields and molecular disruptors, falling to primitive projectiles. Lieutenant Azorix replayed the audio component for the command staff. The sounds were haunting, rhythmic thunder followed by the distinctive wet splatter of Vraxian exoskeletons rupturing. No energy signatures, no plasma discharge, just crude chemical reactions, propelling metal fragments at velocities that somehow bypassed their defensive fields. "They call them guns," explained Science Officer Frelvas, her voice wavering as she consulted her datapad. "Projectile weapons using chemical propellants. Technology their species has utilized for nearly a millennium. Our intelligence overlooked them because no advanced species continues using such archaic tools once they develop energy weapons." Nix Talos stared at the final frame, a human female standing atop a ridge, silhouetted against Proxima's red glow, holding what appeared to be a long metal tube to her shoulder. The Vraxian translation matrix had captured her words. "Tell your leaders this. We kept these weapons not because they're efficient, but because they work when nothing else does." The most disturbing aspect wasn't the casualties. The Vraxian collective had suffered losses before. It was the methodical calm with which the humans had executed their defense, as if they had been preparing for this moment. "Commander," Fleet Strategist Umbriel Kex interrupted, "the humans have requested communication." The viewing screen flickered to life, revealing a stern-faced human with weathered skin and eyes like frozen nitrogen. "Commander Reiko Ozawa of the Terran Defense Force didn't bother with pleasantries. Your incursion into our territory has been classified as an act of war," she stated flatly. "However, the United Earth government is prepared to negotiate terms for your immediate withdrawal." Nix Talos felt his auxiliary hearts accelerate. The audacity. A pre-FTL civilization dictating terms to the Vraxian collective. "You misunderstand your position," he replied, struggling to maintain composure. "The collective does not negotiate with primitive species. Your resistance, while temporarily effective due to unexpected tactics, cannot succeed. We command a fleet of 300 vessels." Commander Ozawa smiled. It was not a gesture of amity. On her world, such a display indicated a predator revealing its teeth. "We've studied your kind for decades, Commander Nix's Talos. Your shields stop energy weapons. Your hulls deflect radiative attacks. Your systems neutralize digital incursions. But you've evolved beyond physical trauma. You've forgotten fear." She gestured, and the transmission widened to reveal row upon row of humans standing at attention behind her, each holding what the Vraxians now recognized as weapons of terrifying simplicity. "We've been fighting ourselves with these for thousands of years. We know exactly how fragile bodies are regardless of their composition, and we've kept these ancient tools, passed down through generations, because some lessons should never be forgotten." Nix Talos felt a sensation alien to his species' collective memory. Ancestral terror, as if recognizing a natural predator his kind had evolved to fear. "You have 6 Earth hours to withdraw," Ozawa concluded. "Or we'll show you why humanity never abandoned its oldest weapons. Even among the stars, we remember how to make gods bleed." The transmission ended. Silence engulfed the bridge. "Orders, Commander?" Lieutenant Azorix finally asked. Nix Talos stared at the frozen image of the human commander. Something primordial told him this was no bluff. "Prepare for strategic relocation," he whispered, "and update the collective archives. Humans, approach with extreme caution." Within the Grand Assembly Chamber of the Vraxian Collective, Supreme Overseer Vrex Melchior listened to Nix Talos's report with increasing agitation. His massive central eye dilated to its fullest extent, a sign of extreme displeasure rarely witnessed by subordinates. "Cowardice," Vrex Melchior hissed, the word reverberating through the chamber's acoustic amplifiers. "You retreated from primitives wielding metal tubes and chemical propellants?" Nix Talos kept his posture submissive, all 17 appendages tucked close to his thorax. "Supreme Overseer, these humans, they're different. Our technological superiority means nothing against weapons designed specifically to destroy biological matter." Footage from the Proxima Centauri engagement played on the massive holographic display. The assembled High Command watched as Vraxian troops, encased in the finest battle carapaces their civilization had engineered, collapsed under barrages of metallic projectiles that somehow penetrated their defensive fields. "Our shields are calibrated to disperse energy," explained Chief Technologist Zith Rava, her voice modulated to project clinical detachment despite obvious distress. "These human weapons bypass our defenses because they operate on purely kinetic principles. The projectiles carry no energy signature for our systems to detect and neutralize." Vrex Melchior's secondary appendages twitched with barely contained fury. "Then recalibrate. Are we not the Vraxian Collective? Have we not subjugated 17 sectors and over 300 species?" "There's something else," Nix Talos added, hesitantly. "We've intercepted communications indicating the humans have deployed what they call special forces throughout the sector. Small teams carrying these ancient weapons, infiltrating our outposts." On cue, Security Director Kel Vorks stepped forward. "Confirmation, Overseer. 3 relay stations have gone silent in the past rotation. No distress signals, no energy discharges detected. Simply silence." The chamber erupted in chittering alarm. Silence meant physical infiltration, an impossibility given Vraxian security protocols. "How?" demanded Vrex Melchior. "Our scanners are designed to detect energy signatures, radiation, and technological emissions," interrupted Zith Rava. "These humans appear to be utilizing completely analog methods. No electronics, no signals to detect." From the shadows stepped Admiral Krelthun, the oldest living Vraxian, his exoskeleton bearing the scars of conflicts centuries past. "We've grown complacent," he said, his voice gravel rough from age. "We evolved beyond physical combat, believing technology would forever shield us from primitive violence. These humans remind us of a forgotten truth. A blade needs no power source to kill." As if summoned by his words, the chamber's secure communications array activated. A human face appeared, not Commander Ozawa, but a male with dark skin and calculating eyes. "Lieutenant Colonel Malik Adebayo of Earth's Special Tactical Response Unit." "Greetings, Vraxian High Command," he said with disturbing pleasantness. "I thought you might appreciate knowing that I'm currently broadcasting from within your supposedly impenetrable Gamma-9 surveillance hub." Vrex Melchior's appendages rattled with shock. "Impossible. The hub is shielded against technological infiltration, yes," Adebayo finished. "But my team simply walked in. Your troops never expected enemies they couldn't detect on scanners." He held up a primitive-looking blade, what humans called a combat knife, its edge stained with the distinctive azure of Vraxian hemolymph. "This message serves as formal notification. For every human colony you threaten, we will eliminate one of your command installations. Not with fleets or energy weapons, but with steel and lead and human ingenuity." Security feeds suddenly activated across the chamber's displays, showing various locations throughout Vraxian space: command centers, shipyards, research facilities. At each location, small teams of humans moved methodically through Vraxian defenses carrying their ancient weapons. "You can't possibly win a war against our entire collective," Vrex Melchior declared, though his tone lacked conviction. Adebayo smiled, that same predatory human expression. We don't need to defeat your entire collective supreme overseer. Just enough of your leadership to make the rest reconsider the price of conquest. The transmission cut abruptly as alarms blared throughout the chamber. Security protocols engaged, locking down the assembly. They're here, whispered Kelvorks, mandibles quivering. In this very complex. The ancient Admiral Krelthun made a gesture unknown to the younger Vraxians, a ritual movement from their species' pre-spaceflight era. We forgot the most fundamental aspect of war, he said quietly. Fear. These humans haven't. Fleet Admiral Zale Dryden of the United Earth Defense Force stood aboard the observation deck of the retrofitted colony ship Prometheus, watching the stars with hands clasped behind his back. At 73 Earth years, his body bore the scars of humanity's earliest interstellar conflicts, but his eyes remained sharp with the intelligence that had made him humanity's foremost military strategist. Report from the Arcturus front, Admiral, announced his aide, Lieutenant Imara Okafor, approaching with a data tablet. Lieutenant Colonel Adebayo's team has successfully neutralized 3 more Vraxian command nodes. Minimal casualties on our side, Dryden nodded without turning. And the prisoners? Being processed as ordered, sir. The xenobiologists are particularly interested in their neural architecture. The door to the observation deck hissed open, admitting Chief Science Officer Dr. Ilara Voss, her silver hair contrasting sharply with her dark uniform. In her hand she carried a secure container marked with biohazard symbols. Admiral, she said, we've made a breakthrough in understanding Vraxian psychology. Dryden turned, his weathered face illuminated by the starlight. Show me. Dr. Voss placed the container on a nearby table and activated its transparent display function. Inside floated what appeared to be a crystalline structure approximately the size of a human fist, glowing with faint bioluminescence. This is a Vraxian memory node, she explained. Their species evolved a decentralized nervous system, with specialized organs storing collective memories passed genetically through generations. It's how they maintained cohesion as a civilization spanning hundreds of worlds. Lieutenant Okafor leaned closer. And what have you learned from it? Dr. Voss's expression tightened. Something fascinating and tactically significant. The Vraxians haven't always been a technological species. They evolved on a harsh world as prey animals, constantly hunted by apex predators. Their entire civilization developed around escaping physical danger through technological means, which explains their vulnerability to our conventional weapons, Dryden concluded. Their evolutionary history created a blind spot. More than that, Dr. Voss continued, the memory structures contain ancestral trauma, genetic memories of being hunted. When our soldiers engage them with physical weapons, we're not just exploiting a tactical weakness. We're triggering species-wide post-traumatic responses. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. You're saying we're not just killing them. We're terrifying them on an instinctual level they can't control. Precisely. Their ancestors evolved to fear physical predators. Their technology gradually insulated them from that fear, until we reintroduced it. A heavy silence fell across the observation deck as the implications sank in. Humanity wasn't merely winning battles. They were waging psychological warfare on a genetic level. Lieutenant Okafor finally spoke, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. Is this ethical, sir? Admiral Dryden turned back to the stars, his reflection in the viewport showing a face burdened by the weight of command. Ethics became a luxury when they attacked our colonies, Lieutenant. They expected submission from what they perceived as a primitive species. Instead, they awakened something they don't understand. Dr. Voss carefully resealed the container. There's something else you should know, Admiral. We've detected increased neural activity in the memory nodes every time we use certain weapons. Bladed weapons in particular seem to trigger the strongest responses. Blades, Dryden murmured. The oldest weapons in human history. Their ancestral predators had natural blades. Serrated appendages evolved for hunting. When our soldiers charge with bayonets or combat knives, we become the monsters. Their species evolved to fear, Dryden finished. Intel suggests the Vraxian collective is fracturing. Several provincial commanders have withdrawn their forces from human space without authorization from their high command. Lieutenant Okafor checked her tablet. Confirmed, sir. And we're receiving increased surrender requests from Vraxian outposts. They're capitulating before our forces even engage. Admiral Dryden's weathered hands gripped the railing before the viewport. Humanity spent millennia developing increasingly sophisticated ways to kill each other. We never abandoned the old ways, even as we developed the new. Not from sentiment, but from pragmatism. He turned to face his officers, his expression resolute. Send word to all fronts, prioritize weapons that maximize psychological impact. I want every Vraxian in this sector to understand that humanity remembers what their species has forgotten. The primal fear of being prey. Dr. Voss looked troubled. Admiral, using their evolutionary psychology against them to this degree, will end this war faster than any alternative, Dryden stated firmly, and remind every spacefaring civilization why humanity should never be underestimated. As his officers departed, Admiral Dryden remained alone on the observation deck, contemplating humanity's paradoxical nature. Advanced enough to reach the stars, primitive enough to remember how fragile all life remains. The grand strategist of the Vraxian collective, Threx Malvorn, had lived for 3 centuries and served through 17 major conflicts. Never before had he witnessed such desperation among the collective's leadership. The Central Strategy Chamber, normally a model of disciplined efficiency, had devolved into cacophonous disorder. Silence, he commanded, his voice amplified by both technology and natural authority. The chamber gradually quieted, compound eyes swiveling toward him. Our situation is unprecedented but not unmanageable, Threx Malvorn continued, activating the central holographic display. The humans exploit our neurological response to physical trauma, a weakness we must acknowledge, to overcome. The display showed footage of human soldiers engaging Vraxian forces across multiple fronts. The collective's superior technology, energy shields, molecular disruptors, neural disruption fields, proved consistently ineffective against humans wielding weapons that predated interstellar travel. Our analysts have identified the core tactical problem, explained Chief Military Theorist Vexa Callan, her thorax plates clicking nervously. Human soldiers operate with individualistic adaptability rather than collective coordination. They improvise, using their environment and our predictable responses against us. Supreme Commander Krex Valtor, newly appointed after his predecessor's death during a human raid, twitched his primary sensory appendages in agitation. Then we must adapt likewise. Our genetic memory contains not just trauma, but survival instincts. Our ancestors didn't merely fear predators, they eventually overcame them. The chamber grew still as ancient genetic wisdom resonated through the assembled leadership. For millennia, the Vraxian collective had relied on technological solutions, forgetting the evolutionary resilience that had initially propelled their species to dominance. The humans call it fight or flight, Threx Malvorn said softly. We chose flight for generations using technology as our escape. Perhaps it's time we remembered how to fight. On the human cruiser Indomitable, Commander Reiko Ozawa received the first reports of changed Vraxian tactics with growing concern. They're adapting, she told her assembled officers, displaying footage from the front lines. Their troops are abandoning standard formation protocols. They're fighting, individually. The video showed Vraxian soldiers moving with unprecedented aggression, using terrain for cover and engaging human forces with modified weapons designed to counter physical attacks. Most disturbing was their newfound resistance to psychological intimidation. Major Hiroshi Tanaka, veteran of the Proxima campaign, studied the footage intently. They've removed their long-range neural communication implants, he noted. They're fighting as individuals rather than a hive mind extension. It's making them less predictable. And more dangerous, added Tactical Officer Lyra Novak. The Vraxians we encountered initially would retreat after sustaining 20% casualties. These new units are fighting to near total destruction. Commander Ozawa's expression darkened. They're tapping into something primal. the same evolutionary survival instinct we exploited against them. She pulled up a tactical map showing Vraxian counteroffensives across 3 systems. They're learning from us, adapting their tactics to mimic our individualistic approach, and they're developing new defensive systems specifically designed to counter projectile weapons. The briefing room fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity's advantage, the psychological terror of ancient weapons, was diminishing as the Vraxians reconnected with their evolutionary past. We forced them to remember what it means to be hunters, Ozawa said grimly. And now they're remembering what it means to hunt. In the classified research facility designated Omega Site, deep beneath Europa's ice, Admiral Dryden observed the experimental procedure with grim fascination. Surrounded by Earth's foremost xenobiologists and military scientists, he watched as Dr. Voss carefully extracted genetic material from the captive Vraxian officer. "The procedure is working," Dr. Voss reported, not looking up from her microscope. "We're isolating the specific genetic markers that encode their ancestral memories." "And you're certain this will work?" Dryden. Dr. Voss finally met his gaze, her expression troubled yet determined. "In theory, yes. By synthesizing compounds that trigger specific genetic memory pathways, we can potentially reactivate their most primal fears so ancient they predate their evolution into sentience." The Admiral nodded solemnly, weaponizing their own genetic memory against them. "It's unprecedented," Dr. Voss admitted, "and ethically complex. We're not just exploiting an existing weakness, we're deliberately triggering trauma on a species-wide level." Dryden turned to the viewport, beyond which lay the sterile white laboratory where dozens of scientists worked on what humanity had classified as Project Nemesis, perhaps their most terrible weapon yet. "The Vraxians are adapting to our conventional tactics," he said quietly. "They're overcoming their fear of our physical weapons. If this conflict continues on its current trajectory, the casualty projections become unacceptable." Dr. Voss stood beside him, her reflection in the glass showing lines of exhaustion and moral conflict. "Even if this works, Admiral, even if we can synthesize a compound that triggers their deepest genetic terrors, what does that make us?" Dryden's weathered face showed no emotion, but his voice carried the weight of countless difficult decisions. "It makes us survivors, Doctor. And perhaps that's what the Vraxians need to understand about humanity. We will use every advantage, cross every line, to ensure our continuation as a species." He turned back to the laboratory, where humanity's most terrifying weapon yet was taking form. Not a bomb or a gun or a blade, but the deliberate exploitation of another species' evolutionary psychology. "Proceed with the final phase," he ordered. Within the sacred inner sanctum of the Vraxian homeworld Virxal Prime, a gathering unprecedented in 10 millennia was underway. The Council of Evolutionary Memory, mystics and genetic archivists who maintained the species' ancestral knowledge, had been summoned by the collective's desperate leadership. Grand Elder Nrex Valamon, his exoskeleton faded to pale turquoise with extreme age, addressed the assembled military command with the slow deliberation of one who had witnessed the passage of civilizations. "You seek to reclaim what we deliberately buried," he said, his voice barely above a whisper yet commanding absolute attention. "The predator mind of our distant ancestors." Supreme Commander Krex Valtor inclined his thorax in the gesture of deepest respect. "The humans exploit our evolutionary fear of physical harm. We must reconnect with the primal strength that allowed our species to survive before technology." The Grand Elder's compound eyes flickered with ancient wisdom. "What you ask violates our most sacred covenant. For 15,000 cycles we have suppressed the hunter instinct that nearly destroyed our species during the Savage Era. There is a reason our civilization embraced technological advancement and collective consciousness as our path forward." "With respect, Elder," countered Strategic Director Fex Volmar, "without accessing these suppressed genetic memories, we face extinction at human hands. Their primitive weapons bypass our defenses because we evolved beyond understanding physical combat." The council chamber fell silent as the Grand Elder moved to a crystalline repository at the chamber's center. The sacred nexus, containing genetic memory samples dating back to the species' earliest consciousness. The memories you seek are not merely buried, the elder explained, activating the ancient repository with trembling appendages. They were deliberately sequestered because of what they represent. Before we became the Vraxian collective, before our neural network allowed shared consciousness across star systems, we were solitary predators who hunted even our own kind. Holographic projections materialized, showing primitive Vraxians engaged. In savage combat, their appendages evolved not for manipulation but for rending flesh. The assembled military leaders recoiled instinctively. This is what you would reclaim, the Grand Elder continued. Not merely the knowledge of how to fight as our ancestors did, but the primal savagery that drove them. Are you prepared for what this will unleash upon our collective consciousness? Supreme Commander Krex Valtor stepped forward. If the alternative is submission to a species that uses sticks and stones alongside starships, yes, we must remember what we once were to survive, what we have become. Aboard the Earth flagship Thermopylae, Admiral Dryden received the first reports of changed Vraxian behavior with growing alarm. They've done something to themselves, Commander Ozawa reported via quantum link, her holographic projection showing fatigue and concern. The Vraxian forces we're engaging are different, more aggressive. They're employing tactics we've never seen before. Tactical displays showed Vraxian battle formations that defied their established patterns. Instead of coordinated hive-mind precision, their movements had become unpredictable, almost feral. Casualties? Dryden asked. 30% increase across all fronts, Ozawa replied grimly. They're adapting to our weapons faster than predicted. Our psychological advantage is rapidly diminishing. Dr. Voss entered the command center, her expression grave. Admiral, we've analyzed tissue samples from recently engaged Vraxian forces. Their neural chemistry shows massive alterations. They've artificially triggered ancestral memory sequences associated with predatory behavior. They're weaponizing their own evolutionary past, Dryden concluded, just as we plan to do against them. With one critical difference, Dr. Voss added. They're doing it to themselves voluntarily, and based on these readings, they're accessing neural pathways far more ancient and far more violent than we anticipated. Lieutenant Okafor approached with a datapad. Sir, our forward positions in the Arcturus sector are reporting Vraxian soldiers continuing to fight even after sustaining injuries that should be incapacitating. They're ignoring pain, ignoring fear. Admiral Dryden's expression hardened. They've turned the tables. We forced them to confront their fears, and now they're embracing what lies beyond fear. Project Nemesis? Dr. Voss asked quietly. Dryden hesitated, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. The bioweapon designed to trigger Vraxian genetic terror had been completed but not yet deployed. A line humanity had not yet crossed. Prepare it for deployment, he ordered finally. But hold for my command. There's something happening here that we don't fully understand. On the contested moon of Erebus IV, Major Alessandra Moretti led her special tactics team through the ruins of what had once been a Vraxian command post. The destruction was total, but what disturbed her wasn't the damage her forces had inflicted, but evidence of violence among the Vraxians themselves. Command, this is Reaper Actual, she reported, kneeling beside the mutilated remains of a Vraxian officer. We're seeing signs of internal conflict. These Vraxians weren't killed by our weapons. They were torn apart by their own kind. Her second-in-command, Captain Devin Koga, gestured toward what appeared to be tribal markings etched into the chitinous walls. These symbols don't match anything in our Vraxian language database. Because they're not modern Vraxian, came Dr. Voss's voice over the comm. They're proto-Vraxian pictographs, territorial markings from their pre-civilized era. Major, what you're witnessing is regression to tribal behavior. Major Moretti surveyed the carnage with new understanding. They're fracturing, whatever they did to access their ancestral combat instincts. It's breaking down their collective consciousness. Get your team out of there immediately, ordered Admiral Dryden. All forces, Prepare for immediate extraction from contested zones. Sir? Moretti questioned. The Vraxians have unleashed something they can't control, Dryden explained. Their civilization is collapsing from within. We're no longer fighting a unified collective. We're facing something far more unpredictable. As her team moved toward extraction, Major Moretti paused at the command center's entrance, looking back at the self-inflicted destruction. Humanity had sought to defeat the Vraxians by exploiting their fear of physical harm. Instead, they had driven their enemy to abandon fear entirely, and with it, the collective consciousness that defined their civilization. The war had entered a phase no strategic model had predicted. The enemy was destroying itself more efficiently than human weapons ever could. The observation platform aboard the diplomatic vessel Concordia offered an unobstructed view of Verxal Prime, the Vraxian homeworld. Admiral Dryden stood beside Grand Elder Nerex Valamon, an unlikely pair united by the necessity of ending a conflict that threatened both their species. 3 months ago, we were trying to exterminate each other, Dryden observed, watching the atmospheric flashes that indicated continuing tribal warfare on the planet's surface. Now we're discussing mutual survival. The ancient Vraxians' compound eyes reflected the distant carnage. Ironic, is it not? You humans sought to defeat us by exploiting our ancestral fears. Instead, you forced us to remember what lies beyond. Fear, the savage violence our species spent millennia evolving away. Dr. Voss approached, accompanied by Lieutenant Okafor and the Vraxian geneticist Zix Valera. The stabilization compound is ready, Dr. Voss reported. Combined with the Vraxian neural harmonizers, it should suppress the activated predatory genes, without eliminating the defensive memories your people have reclaimed. Grand Elder Nerex Valamon's appendages quivered, with what humans now recognized as profound grief. 2/3 of our collective consciousness is already lost. Billions of neural connections severed as our people regress to tribal savagery. Even if we succeed, the Vraxian collective will never be what it once was. Perhaps that's not entirely negative, suggested Zix Valera, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonics of younger Vraxians who had maintained their connection to the collective. Our species pursued technological advancement at the cost of individual resilience. We became dependent on our neural network, our shared consciousness. Now we must find balance between our collective nature and individual strength. Admiral, Dryden turned from the viewport to face the Vraxian representatives. Humanity followed the opposite path. We maintained our individual natures, never developing the kind of collective consciousness your species achieved. Our strength came from diversity of thought, from competition as much as cooperation, and from never forgetting your roots, added the Grand Elder. You carried your most primitive weapons to the stars alongside your most advanced technologies. You remembered what we chose to forget, that all sentient life remains biological, vulnerable to the simplest forms of violence. Lieutenant Okafor checked her tactical display. The deployment vessels are in position, Admiral. They can begin atmospheric dispersal of the stabilizing compound on your command. Dryden hesitated, the weight of the moment not lost on him. Once we do this, the treaty is irreversible. Humanity agrees to withdraw from Vraxian space, and the collective agrees to recognition of human sovereignty throughout the disputed sectors. And both our species acknowledge the dangerous lesson we've learned, the Grand Elder added solemnly. That true strength lies neither in abandoning our evolutionary past, nor in being enslaved by it, but in understanding it. With a nod from both leaders, Lieutenant Okafor gave the command. Across the planet's surface, specially designed atmospheric processors began releasing the compound developed jointly by human and Vraxian scientists. A neurochemical agent designed to suppress the out-of-control predatory instincts while preserving the defensive capabilities the Vraxians had reclaimed. 3 months later, Admiral Dryden stood before the United Earth Council, delivering his final report before retirement. The Vraxian civil conflict has been contained, he stated, his voice carrying the weariness of one who had witnessed too much suffering. Their species is establishing a new form of governance, a federation of tribal collectives rather than the monolithic consciousness they maintained for millennia. Counselor Eliza Mondragon leaned forward. And what of the weapons that started this conflict? The primitive armaments that proved so effective against their advanced defenses? Dryden's weathered face showed a complexity of emotion rarely displayed during his military career. Those weapons have been withdrawn from active deployment, though not decommissioned. The treaty includes mutual recognition that certain forms of warfare are too psychologically devastating to be employed by civilized species. A limitation on our military capabilities? Questioned Counselor Haruto Nakamura skeptically. A recognition of our capacity for mutual destruction, Dryden corrected. The Vraxians nearly destroyed themselves by reclaiming their evolutionary past. We nearly deployed a bioweapon that would have triggered genetic terror across their entire species. Both approaches risked outcomes neither side could fully control. He activated a holographic display, showing the newly established neutral zone between human and Vraxian space, a buffer designed to prevent future conflicts from escalating too quickly. Humanity's strength has always been our ability to remember where we came from while striving for something better, Dryden continued. We carried stone knives alongside plasma rifles because our history taught us that progress isn't always linear. The Vraxians pursued linear advancement, deliberately burying their evolutionary past. He deactivated the display, his final act, as Earth's highest military authority. Both approaches proved incomplete. The future of interspecies relations will require something more nuanced, respect for the evolutionary forces that shaped us, without being governed by them. As Dryden departed the council chambers, Dr. Voss waited in the corridor. Do you think it will last? She asked quietly. This peace? The Admiral considered her question carefully. The Vraxians have been humbled, forced to confront aspects of themselves they spent millennia trying to forget. And humanity has seen the consequences of exploiting evolutionary psychology as a weapon. Neither lesson will be easily forgotten. Together they walked toward the massive viewport overlooking Earth, humanity's ancestral home, the crucible that had shaped their species' unique approach to survival. We keep our ancient weapons, Dryden said, not because we intend to use them, but because they remind us of what we once were and could become again. The Vraxians forgot that lesson and it nearly destroyed them. Dr. Voss nodded thoughtfully. Fear is the price of consciousness, the awareness that we can be harmed, that we will someday cease to exist. The Vraxians tried to evolve beyond fear, through technology and collective consciousness. While we humans embraced it, Dryden finished, we made peace with our fears by preparing for them, carrying stone knives alongside starships not from sentiment, but from hard-won wisdom. As they gazed at the blue planet that had birthed humanity's complex relationship with violence and progress, both understood the profound truth their conflict with the Vraxians had revealed. True strength comes not from transcending one's evolutionary heritage, but from understanding it deeply enough to choose which parts to embrace and which to overcome. In the vast darkness between stars, two civilizations had learned that the most dangerous weapon isn't technology, but forgetting where you came from, and the most powerful shield isn't abandoning fear, but knowing what lies beyond it.